Hola, my name is Carola Oliva Olson. I'm the Vice President of Early Childhood Studies at Advance College. I welcome you today to the Language Justice Initiative's Supporting Home Language series. We have invited guests in the field who have done extensive work and research on how teachers can best support multilingual learners in bilingual classrooms. Today, I have the honor of spending time dialoguing with Dr. Walker-Lee Holman, Dr. Lori Erickson, and Gao Wang. Dr. Walker-Lee Holman is an associate research professor in the Department of Educational Psychology at the University of Minnesota. Her expertise is in early childhood multi-tiered systems of support, assessment development, and early language and literacy development for monolingual and bilingual students. Dr. Lori Erickson is an assistant director of the pre-kindergarten program at St. Paul Public Schools. She oversees the pre-kindergarten curriculum, instruction, assessment, and professional learning that impacts programming for over 1,600 children and families. Dr. Erickson has played an instrumental role in developing and expanding pre-kindergarten immersion programming. And under her tenure, immersion programming, Spanish, French, and Hmong has expanded by 40%. Gao Wang is the Hmong IGDI Grant Specialist in the Office of Teaching and Learning pre-kindergarten program in the St. Paul Public Schools. Her educational background includes a bachelor's in elementary education, a master's in education in teaching and learning, kindergarten to 12, English language learner licensure, and age 3 to pre-primary licensure. Previously, she was the curriculum coordinator for the first Hmong dual language program in the nation and in the St. Paul Public Schools. Wow. So today, our guests will share with us some examples of bilingual preschool models for Hmong and English instruction. So let's begin. What are some examples of bilingual preschool models for Hmong and English instruction?
I'll begin, and then I am going to turn it over to our expert, Gao. So in the St. Paul Public Schools, we do offer 1- and 2-way immersion programming in French, Spanish, and Hmong. And that is for pre-K. And as a system, we also have Chinese immersion programming. So with that said, I will turn it over to Gao.
Yeah, so I'll speak specifically for our Hmong dual language immersion program here in St. Paul Public Schools. So what we have here in St. Paul Public Schools is our 2-way program that follows the 80-20 language immersion model. And both Hmong and English are taught for academic instruction beginning in pre-K. Our students also have the opportunity to continue their Hmong dual language immersion pathway into middle school and high school. And what is, I would say, unique about that is that once students get to high school, in grades 10 through 12, they get a chance to demonstrate their language proficiency in Hmong. And they qualify for this award, which is, like I said, very unique to Minnesota. It's called the Minnesota Bilingual Seals. And once they take the assessment, they are, based on their score, they are able to earn college credits. And that's in Minnesota State universities and colleges. So that's something that we've, I think as a district, has worked really hard on accomplishing that for our students, and they deserve that starting in pre-K with our Hmong dual language program.
I think one thing to just add to that is, and St. Paul should be very proud of this, is this commitment from cradle to college, essentially, in maintaining Hmong and supporting Hmong language development, whereas many other programs have immersion that focuses primarily in the elementary and pre-K spaces. St. Paul has this really strong commitment to holding that up and keeping it as an asset in their development all the way through the end of high school.
That's fantastic. So what should we know about Hmong to teach literacy skills in a bilingual preschool program?
can start from the research lens and then hand it to Lori and Gal to talk about what it looks like in practice. So, in the field, we really have no existing evidence-based curriculum and tools that are tailored to Hmong communities. And Hmong is not alone in this way. The history of education in the United States has prioritized English. And so as a result, many other languages also do not have very many resources. But one of the things that's unique about Hmong is that Hmong communities are highly centralized in 2 to 3 areas of the United States, one being St. Paul, Minnesota, and the other being Fresno, California. And so when there is a high density population, it becomes really apparent that we need resources to support those communities that are filling our classrooms. And really those resources are just not available. The grant that we work on is one initiative to build out some of those materials. The tools that we are working on are called the Individual Growth and Development Indicators, and they're designed in Hmong for pre-K environments. But I'll hand it to Lori and Gao to talk a little bit about what does it look like in the classroom and what they've been doing with materials in St. Paul.
And so this is really funny. Here's Alicia with the research lens. I'm going to come down and talk more about the family lens, and then Gao is the expert on the classroom level. When we began this project a number of years ago, we heard loud and clear from our families that they valued the language, but they didn't understand that it should be valued in the school setting. And they, in some ways, were saying, we don't really speak Hmong at home. This is telling them, yes, you need to, and you need to continue that. We want to build the language and the richness around the language, and you need to be proud of it. And that's been one of the byproducts of this grant.
So that comes to the practice piece of being in the classroom, in the schools, and just speaking from my experience as a teacher as well to educator, being in the classroom, in the schools, around families, as well as the need for this. And we started with a lot of just translations, right? Translating from English to Hmong and finding out that it doesn't work well that way, not always. So it has led us to the IGD project here and creating a assessment that is in Hmong, including voices from families, community members, teachers, students as well too. So we already know that the curriculum is not available, materials are not, we can't go out on Amazon or on any website and say, hey, I want to find a Hmong curriculum or just Hmong materials, resources in general. So a lot of it is created and translated by teachers. And that is a lot of work, but I think what we are fortunate with is the support from the district, support from our colleagues as well too, and not just the manpower, but just the I think just the voice of empowerment of like, this is the need and this is what our students need, our families want, and we are up for the challenge. And there's many, I think in St. Public Schools, we're continuing to grow. Our Hmong dual language is continuing to grow from pre-K. We've started with 1-2 classroom. Now we're like 5 more this year that we're adding. So it is continuing to grow. And I think with the voices of, like I said, from our family saying, this is what we want, this is what we need. So that's what we're working towards.
Thank you. Alicia, could you share with us a little bit about what the IGDs are and what it stands for and how it
Yeah,
goes
so
practice?
IGD is the acronym for Individual Growth and Development Indicator. They're a series of tools that are designed in various languages, in Spanish, in English, and in Hmong, as we're talking about here today. And the emphasis around IGDs is that they have a couple core tenets that are really important. One is that they have to be really easy to use in pre-K classrooms. So they're designed for folks like paraprofessionals or educational assistants to be able to pick them up and be able to use them really easily. They're brief. They're designed to be 1 to 2 minutes each, to be sort of a get in and get out kind of quick temperature check on how kids are doing in their language and literacy skills. and they're instructionally relevant, which means that the scores that we get from these tools are really designed to map onto practices that teachers are using in the classroom so that they can take that information and decide what they're going to do different tomorrow for this particular student. So we work really hard to maintain assessment frameworks that allow teachers to see value in the data that's coming out of the tools. And we do that with the IGDs in a couple of different ways. One is, as Gao mentioned, really designing, in this case, in Hmong from the ground up. So all of the content we've been working in community with and with Gao and the folks in the schools to talk about what does this look like in Hmong and how do we think about that, versus just taking a English tool and translating it, right? So very different approach in the development process. And then thinking about what is developmentally typical for Hmong language development in the context of the Hmong generations that have been existing in our case in St. Paul and Fresno, which is a different trajectory than what we're seeing in English, right? The language has had some loss experiences. There's also different generational value, as Lori was saying, about how families were perceiving the added value of Hmong in the classroom and how that shifted over time. Now we're adding more and more classrooms. We can see that kind of coming back up again as families are reinvesting in the Hmong language. So all of that is tied and baked into the process of design. And we've been very fortunate to get federal funding from the Institute of Education Sciences and 2 different awards to continue the work. And we anticipate applying for additional funds to move into the elementary grades with this work as well.
You are our North Star in the field. That is such an incredible, not just story of how it evolved, but the length, the trajectory that it starts in the early years. It's about family engagement. It's about a community, the context, and all the way to honoring and celebrating the gains for the students, right? And the accomplishments, and how that translates to life journeys for everyone. So now I'm curious, is there anything that teachers need to know about teaching in the home, in Hmong as their home language, and how that differs from English?
Again, I'm going to defer to Gao for on the ground. One thing I found fascinating, as someone who does not speak Hmong, and the amount of time that our educators have spent on level setting how to use a language, and the way in which certain words should be used, and the deep conversations within a pre-K team, and then also within the pre-K-5 building setting, how they are going to use that language, and the time and commitment that it's taken to get to that place. It's incredible work.
Yeah, and I would add to that too, is that, with the language, evolving and continuing to evolve, we learned new things every day about our language. And even though, I am fluent in my language, the generation piece that we're learning and the discussion that we have around that is very intriguing and unique to our Hmong language. So I think going back to about the teaching of our Hmong language, it is so critical that we involve our families, our community members, even to our what we're learning from our 3 to 4 year olds that we're working with right now too, of how they're developing language at home, specifically to our Hmong language, and how that has changed from generation to generation as well too, and continue to have those deep conversations of how do we support our Hmong language at home and in the schools. So that has led us to be more specific about curriculum materials and how we develop that, and things that we need to consider. And I would say, talking about the teaching of Hmong language, is that there's many dialects of Hmong around the world. And now we're not just talking about in the United States, but around the world, there's many dialects. But we have come to know more about the dialects that are more familiar here in the United States to support our families and our children. And that goes to the white and green Hmong dialect that we also are having that discussion as we're developing these assessments, that we're just not valuing the white, which is which in the Hmong community is the dominant, but there is also the green Hmong that we do value as well too, and trying to also balance that and create those assessments that are available for both dialects. So that's more specific to teaching the Hmong language. And of course, we're a tonal language. So that in itself, as we're working with the 3, 4, 5-year-olds, that oral language piece is very important because it's tonal. So the way that we speak, the way that we hear, those are aspects that we are very intentional about. And have those discussions about, well, what is really age appropriate? What do we expect for these age level students? And those conversations are also happening as well too. So I think just the expertise of everyone is very critical. And it's not, again, it's from the research lens of Alicia, it's from the administrative lens of Lori and myself here, working on the grant as well, from the classroom, from the family, from the Hmong language perspective, that all of those are very critical as we build curriculum, as we build materials and consider all of these little aspects as we also create these assessments.
That's very different from a bilingual program that's teaching in English and Spanish, where Spanish and English, there are lots of similarities, there are differences, but the similarities make it easier for teachers to bridge across the languages. And so this is fascinating again, and I'm interested to hear from the three of you, what words of wisdom do you want to share with our teachers?
Alicia, you begin.
Sure. I think, Gao and Lori just spoke to the tremendous variation we see within the Hmong culture in generational status and how that nurtures the language, in dialect. We also know that Hmong is a relatively new language, meaning that while the oral tradition is old, the written component really didn't surface until the 60s. And so the language is evolving rapidly, and new terms are evolving. The way people learn and interact with it are evolving. And so one of the words of wisdoms I would share with educators is to really emphasize the importance of sharing that language in the home setting and having adults, elders, and children communicating, even if they feel like, oh, I'm not that good at it, to practice and get that sort of as a regular routine at home, because that does a tremendous amount to support that language development when we know it's happening at home. And as you heard Lori say, there's 5 new classrooms, right? We know that is happening, that we're seeing more and more of that, but just continuing to drive home that importance and that recognizing that we should not be suppressing Hmong for English, as has been maybe the historical sort of assimilation frame, and switching that to say, this is a tremendous asset that your children have, and we want to be able to nurture that. So that's one nugget that I would share. I'll pass it to Lori and Gao to share their words of wisdom.
And I'm going to echo what Alicia said. It was, my goodness, probably 5 years ago. We did a focus group with community members who also had children in the St. Paul schools in Hmong dual language programming, and they were very clear: our kids don't want to speak Hmong, so we don't. We just don't speak Hmong. And we walked away from that session saying that is not okay. We need to, as a school community, just loud and proud and at every opportunity, let families know that this is an asset. You need to continue speaking Hmong at home and insist that your children, your grandchildren, your community members speak back to you in Hmong. That has to happen, and that our teachers play a really pivotal role in that, in the way in which they're communicating with families.
Gao, do you have any words of wisdom for for teachers in the field?
I think Alicia and Lori said it really well. I think as far as for teachers, like I said, in my experience is, I know teachers who are in the field. They have their reasons of why they're there. They're there to support our children and our families. And specifically for our Hmong dual language program here in St. Public Schools, our educators are working really hard, and we are also supporting them any way that we can as well too. So I think Lori and Alicia said it really well of how we can support each other and our families around nationwide, not just here in St. Paul, but I think in general, we're working and we're connecting with families in Wisconsin and in California with our work here too. So it's not just in Minnesota.
And
Yeah, go ahead, Lori. Sorry.
No,
I do want to put in one other plug. Alicia said it just a few moments ago that the IGDs are designed to impact instructional practice and change the direction of achievement for children. And teachers have to use the data that they're collecting. It can't just go back on the shelf. And the IGDs truly are, they're quick and they're designed to be that way. We need to start using that data to drive instruction.
I would just add, Carla, to any of the folks who are watching this video, if you're not in a district that has these kinds of supports, but you do support Hmong students, I would really encourage you, one, to reach out. We're happy to share resources. And two, to work really hard to understand what skills those children are bringing into the classroom by talking to the families. And as educators, really investing in understanding what Hmong assets they're bringing in so you can use that and leverage that in learning in the classroom. Because we recognize that not all districts across the nation or programs across the nation are having these tools quite yet, but there are lots of Hmong communities that are much smaller around the nation that, you know, these children are showing up in our classrooms and need the support just like any other student in the classroom. So just a little plug there to say reach out and inquire about the Hmong language at home.
well, what a dynamite group. What a dynamite team. So thank you so much for joining us today. It was a true honor speaking with you, and I'm incredibly grateful for your guidance, your expertise, and I look forward to continue to learn more from you in the future and collaborating in some way or another. So we'll send this out, and we'll have information so that they can contact those who want to reach out to you, have a way to do so. Muchísimas gracias. Y hasta la próxima.
Thank you, Carola.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.